Autism in Marriage Explained, and I mean actually explained, not just a list of traits on a clinical handout, is what we're doing today. Because if you are living this, you deserve more than a Wikipedia summary.
Whether you are the autistic partner trying to understand why certain things keep creating friction, or the partner married to someone who's on the spectrum, who sometimes feels invisible, confused, or just plain exhausted, this video is going to give you the language for what is actually happening between you. And honestly, some of what we shared might be the first time it has ever made sense.
We've been married for 23 years and we are still figuring parts of this out. But we've learned enough that we want to share it because there is one thing in particular that quietly creates more damage than almost anything else in an autistic marriage, and most couples have no idea it's even happening. We'll get to that before we're done. But first, a quick introduction for anyone who's new here. 23 years ago, I married Lori, and at that point, I had zero idea I was on the autistic spectrum. I had suspicions about myself, the way routines felt non-negotiable, the way last-minute changes of plans could ruin an entire day, but nobody ever put a name to it.
And I'm Lori. I have ADHD, and I married this very detail-oriented, very structured, occasionally very hard to read man. And I did not fully understand what I was working with either. But I knew he was different. I did not always know what to do with different.
We talk about real relationship dynamics here, the kind that nobody puts in a wedding toast. This comes from lived experience, not from a textbook. We are not therapists or counselors, and if your relationship ever feels unsafe or abusive, please reach out to a qualified professional who can actually help.
Actually, I think some of it may have been in our wedding toast. I think my dad mentioned how you may be the right one to take care of all the details while I was seeing the whole big picture of all the things in life. I remember it because I thought it was a little odd thing to say, but parents, I guess they have a little bit of a foresight, wisdom that we didn't have. Okay, let's get into it.
Before we do, if communication is already the thing you're struggling with most, we actually have a free guide for that called What I Mean versus What You Hear, a translation guide for couples. It's a quick read that gives you practical language to bridge exactly the kind of gap we're about to talk about. The link is in the description below. Okay, so communication is the first place autism shows up in marriage, and in my experience, it is where the most damage quietly accumulates because so much of it is invisible. Here's my honest experience. I often do not know what to say, and I do not particularly want to say a lot. In fact, I developed the belief that I really only should say anything when I have something of genuine value to offer, something useful, something that moves things forward. In my head, that is just being efficient and effective. In a marriage, it turns out that it is a problem because Lori does not experience my silence as efficiency. She experiences it as distance.
And that is exactly it. I grew up in a house with 9 people in it. My version of alone time was the bathroom. That was literally it. So when Ryan goes quiet, when he walks right past me in the kitchen like I'm a piece of furniture he has already cataloged and filed away, my nervous system does not read that as he's thinking. It reads that as something is wrong, and it's probably me.
Which is the last thing I want her to feel, but I understand completely why it's understood that way. The problem is not that I go quiet. The problem is that I had no structure around it. So it was just happening randomly without explanation and at the expense of Lori feeling connected to me. I've had to learn deliberately and consistently that she needs me to show up verbally, even when I have nothing particularly useful to report. That was not natural for me. It still is not always natural, but I do it anyway. What has actually worked is building a system around it. I put in regular touch points during shared time. I stop what I am doing. I go find her. I make eye contact. I ask what she's working on. It is not always a long conversation. It does not need to be. What matters is that she knows I am aware she is there and that she is a higher priority than whatever project I'm in the middle of. I just needed to learn to show it in ways she could actually receive.
And when those check-ins happen, it genuinely changes everything. I stop trying to interpret what his face is doing. I stop replaying the last thing he said, trying to figure out if I did something wrong. I feel like I'm actually with my husband instead of just sharing a house with someone who is very focused on other things.
There's also a flip side to this that is worth naming. When Laurie is genuinely upset, really activated, my autism actually helps me. I can approach that without reacting. I can ask calmly what she needs and when I can do better, and I can take notes. I literally take notes. and then I apply it.
Yep. I want you to picture that for a moment. Like if I'm really upset, your husband calmly pulls out his phone to thumb note your feelings. It is both incredibly thoughtful and faintly absurd. But here's the thing, he actually reads the notes later and things actually change. So I will take it.
If communication feels like your biggest wall right now, I want you to know that it was ours too. What helped us most was not trying to become different communicators. It was building small, consistent structures that bridge the gap between how I naturally operate and what Lori actually needs. You can build that too, and we will keep talking about how throughout this video.
This next one took me a long time not to take personally. And I think a lot of partners of autistic people are in the exact same boat.
I need alone time the way some people need food. It is not optional. It is how my nervous system resets after simulation, interaction, and the general noise of being a person in the world. Left entirely to my own preferences, I honestly think I could spend the majority of my time alone and feel completely fine about it. I do not have many friends outside of Lori, and I do not feel like I need many. I am genuinely my own best company most of the time.
He could be a hermit in the wild somewhere if I were not around. And I am completely opposite. 9 people in the house growing up, remember. Quiet felt like something was wrong. So when we first got married and Ryan would just disappear into a project for hours without a word, I did not understand it at all. I thought he was avoiding me. I thought I had done something wrong, or I thought maybe I made a mistake and he wasn't as interested in me as I thought, even though we were married.
Which is so far from the truth. But I understand why it read that way. The issue was that my alone time was just happening unpredictably without warning and with no explanations. And it was coming at the expense of Lori feeling connected. What I've learned to do now is build intentional structure around it. I limit how much alone time I take during shared hours. Before I go into a project, I make sure Lori knows I am present, I have checked in, she feels like a priority. The alone time still happens, I still need it, but now it's predictable and it does not leave her wondering where she stands.
And that shift, just knowing when to expect it, knowing it was not about me, that has made an enormous difference. I know he is recharging and I know he is coming back. That predictability for someone with ADHD who is already managing a lot of mental noise is genuinely everything.
Connected to this is hyperfocus. And this is the thing that quietly damaged Lori's sense of being seen more than almost anything else in the early years. When I'm focused on something, I am completely focused. She could walk past me 3 times and I won't even acknowledge her in any way. Not because I was choosing to ignore her, my brain just fully committed its resources elsewhere. She would come to me later feeling invisible and I had no idea.
When the person you love looks right through you, for some people, your brain goes to some pretty dark places. But for me, being ADHD, I too have a tendency to hyperfocus. So I get it. But to a person who doesn't have experience with what hyperfocus looks like, it can be hurtful and damaging.
And I want to be clear here. Understanding the reason does not excuse the impact. It is still my responsibility to manage. The harder piece to talk about is dysregulation. We have neurodivergent kids who are very skilled at pushing my buttons. And when my nervous system gets overloaded enough, I have reacted in ways that I'm not proud of. Not toward Lori directly, but she sees it and it affects how safe she feels with me. That is a real cost. What I've learned is to let the structure do the work before I reach that point. If a kid is refusing to get up for school, the consequence is already set. Electronics go, I do not need to escalate. I just let the rule kick in and I walk away regulated. That protects my nervous system and it protects Lori's trust in me.
And I want to say this because I think it matters. When I watched Ryan choose the regulated response, when I see him step back instead of react, it builds something between us that no grand gesture could replace. That consistency tells me he is working on this. That tells me our family is safe and that we are important. And that is what trust actually looks like in a marriage day to day.
If shutdown or overwhelm is something that comes up in your relationship, whether it's you or your partner who gets there, we have a free resource called the Shutdown Recovery Script, What to Say When One of You Gets Overwhelmed. It's a short practical guide with natural language you can use in these moments instead of making things worse. The link is in the description below. Whether it's the need for alone time, hyperfocus, or dysregulation, these are all nervous system patterns, not character flaws. And when you start seeing them that way, you stop fighting the person and start working with the pattern. That is where real changes live. Every time you choose the regulated response, you are making a deposit in the trust account. those deposits add up. I want to talk about something that has probably created more unnecessary conflict in our marriage than almost anything else. And it took a trip to Australia for me to really start to get it. One of the biggest challenges being on the spectrum is that I can be very inflexible. If I set my mind to something, I intend to do it regardless of anything else. I latch onto an intention and see it as the best option, the right option for that time and place. Shifting from that position can be very difficult, and this can create real conflict when someone else doesn't want to go along with my plans.
And this is something it took me years to understand about Ryan. When he has decided something is the right move, letting go of it is not a simple pivot. It is a whole internal process. And in the early years, before we had any framework for this, it looked like stubbornness or rigidity, or I will be honest, like he cared more about his plans than he cared about anyone else in the group or me.
Which is not true, but I understand completely why it read that way. My brain locks onto an idea because it feels safe. I know the outcome. I have planned for it. It fits my mental model of how the day should go. Shifting from it requires me to actually process the loss of the plan before I can engage with a new one. When I do not get that processing time, I shut down or I dig in, and everyone around me ends up feeling like they have ruined something, even when nothing is actually ruined.
Hmm. So having a temper tantrum along with the kids and also then pouting when they don't get their way doesn't sound much like a husband, more like one of the kids. But I'm glad we've grown out of this. Thank goodness for his thumb notes, eh?
The idea of routine connects here too. I like going back to places I know work, same vacation spot, same Netflix series, same route to the grocery store. The risk of trying something new and not liking it feels much higher to me than the potential downside of liking it. So I default to what I already know is safe. Lori is the opposite. She wants new, novel, and different.
Sometimes I drive different ways to the grocery store on purpose, and we live in a very small town, and or maybe I just forget temporarily where I'm going, but I digress. Anyhow, in the early years, I interpreted his preference for the familiar as a lack of interest in exploring, or honestly, a lack of interest in anything I may prefer or be interested in. Like, why on earth do you need still to take canned peas camping just because that's what you had when you were a kid? They're gross. There are so many better camping foods out there, really.
But you still need your veggies when you're camping.
Right.
But we've landed on a balance. For trips, I plan the essentials and I genuinely enjoy planning. It is one of those autistic traits that is a real asset when it's pointed in the right direction. And then I leave space within that plan for spontaneity. If Lori wanted to plan a summer road trip in July, we would have no camping spots and a lot of frustration.
Okay, I plan for a hotel. And I disagree with the a lot of frustration comments. It's more adventurous my way, but I will also admit that my no plan generally also adds up to a more expensive one. So yes, his need to plan benefits everyone.
I plan ahead so we always have what we need. And then I build in room for whatever we decide to do at the time. And I've learned that we're not going to die if we don't eat our vegetables for a day. It's true. The same inflexibility has shown up in more significant moments in our marriage, though. Moments where Lori needed me to be flexible and I could not immediately get there.
One example was on a trip to Australia. Ryan had a plan to get to a specific spot to see some rainforests and beaches, but the traffic that day was particularly bad, and he became worried that we might not even make it according to his plan before dark. Then I saw on the side of the road a big, beautiful Aboriginals culture center, and really wanted to go. I thought, well, since we can't do the thing Ryan planned, why fret? Look what we just discovered. Ryan was in shutdown mode. It is hard to be sunshine and lollipops when he is all clouds and cactus. But I was excited, and I have learned to not let his moments ruin mine. It was so cool, and we even got to dine on interesting Australian Indigenous food. Now, kangaroo and crocodile isn't on my craving list, but it's better than canned peas.
What I have learned over time is that letting go of my plan very often leads to something better than what I had in mind. I still need a few minutes to get there, though. I can't always flip instantly, and trying to force that flip just creates more shutdown, but I can and will get there a lot faster than I used to.
What has helped us enormously is when Ryan is honest about that process in real time. When he says, give me a few minutes to shift gears instead of just going silent or digging in harder, I can work with that. I know what is happening. I know it is not personal. And a few minutes later, he is usually not only on board, sometimes is actually enthusiastic about the new direction, which is always slightly baffling and also very enduring. I think he loved the Aboriginal Culture Center as much as I did in the end. And we got to hike in the rainforest the next morning.
If inflexibility and routine feel like constant friction points in your relationship, the good news is that understanding the way behind them completely reframes how you respond to them. It is not stubbornness, it is a nervous system that feels safest with predictability. And that is something you can actually work with together once you stop treating it like a character flaw.
Okay, we have talked about a lot of hard things, and I want to be clear, those things are genuinely hard. We are at a point where we can jest a bit now, but I would not want you to think we minimize the struggle for a second because it wasn't a laughing matter at the moment. But I always want to talk about this part because I think it is a piece that gets left out of most conversations about autism in marriage. And it is the positive piece that honestly keeps us together through some of the most difficult years. When I first suspected Ryan might be on the autistic spectrum, which happened after one of our children was diagnosed, and I started recognizing a lot of the same patterns. I had a moment of real uncomfortable vulnerability, and I wondered if I'd known this from the beginning, would I have given him a chance? That is a hard thing to admit out loud, but it is honest because the communication challenges are real. If communication is one of the most important foundations of a marriage to be successful, and one partner's brains does not naturally process social communication the way the others expect, it makes relationships hard. It is not impossible, but it is hard.
And I want to sit with that for a moment because I think a lot of partners have that exact thought and feel guilty about it. You are not a bad person for having that question. It is a valid question. And for most people who genuinely love someone on the spectrum, I think the answer is the same as Lori's, which is that you didn't ever have to fall in love with autism. You fell in love with a person.
Exactly. And when I actually looked at what drew me to Ryan in the first place, the things I fell in love with, I realized that so many of those qualities are directly tied to the way his brain is wired, his intelligence, the way he processes patterns and problems and solutions in ways that genuinely astound me. I call him my Google because I need to know something. He either already knows it or can find it faster than I can open a tab. That sounds like a joke, but it is actually one of my favorite things about him. He also plans our family vacations, like we've already discussed, in a way that I could never pull off on my own. ADHD and detailed trip planning are not a natural partnership. The idea of coordinating and all of that from scratch is genuinely overwhelming for me. Ryan has us booked, mapped, and provisions months ahead of time. We always have the camping spot. We always have the plan. I get to show up and experience the adventure he has already built for us. This is not a small thing. This is enormous.
And the loyalty piece, I want to name this clearly because I feel it very strongly. When I commit to something, I commit fully. My family is my primary focus. Lori is my primary priority. I protect weekly time for just the two of us. I plan getaways. I think about what will make her feel loved and I build it into the schedule because that is how I operate. I may not always be the person who texts you from the next room just to say I'm thinking about you, but I'm the person who has your anniversary trip planned 4 months in advance. Both of those things are love. They just look different.
He remembers dates way better than I do. I began learning to stop measuring his love by whether it looks like the way I expected love to look and started to recognize it in the way that he was actually expressing it. That change made so much difference for us. I also wanted to say that if we didn't work hard together to learn about ourselves, learn about our characteristics, and make a change, our marriage probably would not have worked if we were stuck in a mode of just, this is just me and this is how it is. Now, there is also the humor. Can we talk about the humor for just a second? The dad jokes. Oh, the dad jokes.
Well, okay, my humor is very specific, very deadpan. Lori doesn't always follow all of it, but that's fine. And when it lands, the perfectly timed impression, the play on words delivered with complete seriousness, it really lands. Our kids roll their eyes every single time.
We all roll our eyes, but secretly we all wait with bated breath for the next one. I consider that a success. The household maintenance piece deserves a mention too. He realizes that if he wanted things done on his timeline and his standards, sometimes he just had to do them. And he does. We take care of things together. I have never had to complain about him not pulling his weight around the house. That is not nothing. That is a lot. Here's what I want you to take from this. The traits that create the most friction in an autistic marriage are very often the same traits that, in the right context and with the right understanding, become genuine strengths. The detail orientation that sometimes frustrated me is the same thing that means our finances are in order and our vacations are seamless. His understanding for routine and scheduling also helps our kids on the autistic spectrum who need predictability. He understands them in ways that I can only read about.
Yeah. The need for routine that sometimes felt suffocating to Lori is the same thing that makes me a very reliable and consistent presence. I've also had to grow, learning to compromise, to let others have their way, to tolerate unpredictability. And that growth is real and it matters. I'm still working on it. I now try something new quite often. I leave more room in the schedule for other people's spontaneous plans. I'm better at letting go of the plan when something else makes more sense. Not always, not perfectly, but better. And the marriage is better every time I manage it.
You did not fall in love with a diagnosis. You fell in love with a person. And when you understand how that person is wired, the hard parts and the beautiful parts, so much of what felt like a problem starts to look like something you can actually work with.
Before we wrap it up, we want to ask you something, and we genuinely want to hear your answer in the comments below. After everything we just covered, what is the one thing you wish you had understood earlier about autism in your relationship? Whether you're the autistic partner, the one married to someone on the spectrum, or somewhere in between, drop it below. Do read every single one, and your answer might be exactly what someone else needed to see today. Autism in marriage does not mean you're incompatible. It means you are wired differently. And that is something you can understand. It is a set of real, identifiable patterns in communication, in regulation, in routine that you can learn to name, understand, and work with together. Every step you take toward understanding what is actually happening between you is a step toward less friction, more safety, and a relationship that actually fits how both of you are wired.
You do not have to solve all of it at once. Start with one thing. Maybe it is the touch points. Maybe it is the reframing the silence. Maybe it is just deciding to stop interpreting your partner's needs to recharge as a commentary on your value. One change opens room for the next one.
And if you want to figure out exactly where the specific friction in your relationship is coming from, whether it's communication, overwhelm, disconnection, or something else, we have a free quiz in the description below called the Relationship Friction Pattern Quiz. And it takes just a few minutes and points you to the exact pattern causing tension in your relationship, plus a free resource to help you start working through it. The link is in the description below. Now that you understand what autism actually looks like day to day inside a marriage, the communication gaps, the regulation needs, the inflexibility, you might be wondering, how does this all connect to ADHD? Because in a lot of couples, both are in the room at the same time, and that combination creates its very own specific dynamic. That is exactly what we break down in our ADHD in marriage video right here. Watch that one next, because when you pair what you just learned about autism with how ADHD actually shows up in a relationship, the full picture of why your patterns repeat becomes a lot clearer and a lot more workable. Thanks for watching, and remember,
Even neurodivergent couples can make relationships work.